Welcome back to Talk Tickers. You ready to dive into some earnings calls?
Always ready.
Awesome. Today we're taking a deep dive into Axsome Therapeutics' latest report, and, well, let's just say it's a wild one.
It is. CNS treatments are a hot area right now, and Axsome is right in the thick of it.
Okay, so for our listeners who might not be familiar with Axsome, can you give us a quick overview?
They're a relatively new company, went commercial just a couple of years ago.
So they're still kind of the new kid on the block.
Exactly, but don't let that fool you. They've already made a huge splash, focusing on developing and commercializing treatments for all sorts of CNS conditions.
Like what? Give us some examples.
We're talking depression, insomnia, migraine, you name it, they're probably working on it.
Ambitious. All right. But ambition only gets you so far in the pharmaceutical world. What do the numbers say?
Well, they just smashed through a major milestone, over $100 million in revenue this quarter.
Whoa, seriously?
Seriously, $104.8 million to be exact.
That puts them on track for, what, like a $420 million annual run rate?
Right on the money. And keep in mind, they're only 3 quarters into their second full year of actually selling products.
Yeah, that's impressive. So where's all this revenue coming from?
Their 2 main drugs are Avality for depression and Sunosi for sleep disorders.
Okay, so those are the big hitters.
Definitely. They're both performing incredibly well in the market.
Let's start with Avality. What kind of numbers are we looking at?
Hold on to your hats. Avality brought in $80.4 million this quarter.
No way. That's more than double what it made last year, right?
Yep. And a 24% jump from just last quarter.
That's some insane growth. What's driving that kind of success?
It's a combination of factors. For one, Avality is outperforming the overall antidepressant market.
Really? So it's not just riding the wave of a growing market, it's actually exceeding expectations.
Exactly. It's even beating out some of the big-name branded competitors.
Interesting. So they must have a really solid marketing strategy in place.
Absolutely. They've clearly identified a need in the market, and they're doing a fantastic job of getting the word out to patients and healthcare providers.
Okay, so Avality is a rock star. What about Sunosi? Is it keeping pace?
Sunosi's no slouch either. It saw a 21% year-over-year revenue increase, reaching $24.4 million this quarter.
Not too shabby.
Ugh.
So they've got these 2 strong performers carrying the weight right now.
They are. But here's where things get really interesting. Axsome isn't just relying on their current products. They have a pipeline jam-packed with potential blockbusters.
Hold on, jam-packed. We're talking more than just a couple of promising drugs here.
We're talking 5 late-stage product candidates across 9 different indications.
Whoa! Now that's what I call ambitious, if even half of those pan out.
We could be looking at peak sales well over $16 billion.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What are some of the highlights of this pipeline? What should we be watching for?
Well, their migraine drug, AXS-07, is generating a ton of buzz. They just resubmitted the new drug application.
So they're just waiting on the FDA's decision now.
Yep. The target decision date is January 31st, 2025.
So less than 3 months. Are they just sitting around twiddling their thumbs until then?
Not a chance. They're already busy making all the preparations for the launch.
Smart move. Got to be ready to hit the ground running. What else is in the works?
They're also planning to file an NDA for AXS-14 for fibromyalgia this month.
Fibromyalgia, huh? That's a tough one to treat. Lots of unmet needs there.
Exactly. So a new effective therapy would be huge.
I can already see the headlines. Okay, what else? There were a lot of indications, right?
Oh, yeah. We also have AXS-05, which is targeting Alzheimer's disease agitation.
Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Man, any progress in treating that is a big deal.
I know, right? It's such a devastating disease. They're wrapping up 2 phase 3 trials for AXS-05, and we're expecting the results sometime this quarter.
So potentially another NDA filing on the horizon.
Potentially. Then there's AXS-12, also known as reboxetine, which is being investigated for narcolepsy.
Narcolepsy. Okay, they really are running the gamut of CNS disorders.
And on top of all that, they're also exploring new uses for their existing drug, solriamfetol.
Wait, so they're not content with just developing new drugs, they're finding new applications for existing ones too.
Yep. They're looking at using it for ADHD, major depressive disorder, binge eating disorder, even shift work disorder.
So they're going after the tired and wired market in a big way. That's a smart strategy.
It is. They're recognizing the overlapping needs of all these different patient populations.
Okay, so we've got ambitious leadership, strong performing drugs, and a pipeline overflowing with potential. But can they keep up with this crazy growth? What about their sales force?
They're already on it. They're actually planning a second expansion of their sales force, specifically to support Avality.
Makes sense, especially with all the new stuff coming down the pipeline.
Exactly. They'll have a total of 300 reps focused just on the psychiatry market.
Wow. But expanding a sales force isn't cheap. Are they burning through cash?
Surprisingly, no. They're actually in a really strong financial position. They finished the quarter with $327.3 million in cash and cash equivalents.
Okay, so they're not exactly hurting.
And they're confident that they have enough cash to reach cash flow positivity with their current plans.
That's music to any investor's ears. No wonder their stock is doing so well.
Right. It jumped over 9% today after they announced their Q3 results, closing at $99.49.
Yeah, that's a serious vote of confidence from the market. Clearly, investors are buying into the Axsome growth story.
They are. But before we get too carried away, let's take a closer look at some of the potential challenges they might face down the road.
All right, let's talk about those roadblocks. What should investors be aware of?
Well, competition is always a factor in this industry, right?
True. So who are they up against?
Well, there's a new atypical antipsychotic drug that might get approved next year as an add-on treatment for depression.
But isn't that targeting a slightly different segment of the market than Avality?
Technically, yes, but it could still pose some level of competition.
So not an immediate threat, but definitely something to keep an eye on.
Exactly. Another potential challenge is patient access, especially when it comes to their Alzheimer's treatment.
What do you mean by patient access?
Well, high out-of-pocket costs are a big issue for a lot of patients in the Alzheimer's market.
That's tough. So how is Axsome planning to address that?
They're hoping to leverage their relationships with payers and PBMs to help make treatment more affordable if and when AXS-05 is approved.
Okay, so they're thinking about the big picture, not just profits. That's good to hear.
It is. Now, analysts are also curious about solriamfetol and how it's going to differentiate itself, especially with Avality already doing so well for major depressive disorder.
Yeah, that makes sense. Why develop two drugs for the same condition?
Well, the key difference is that solriamfetol's trials are enrolling patients both with and without excessive daytime sleepiness, whereas Avality is specifically targeting those with depression and significant daytime sleepiness.
So it's about casting a wider net and finding the right drug for the right patient.
Exactly. Now, one last thing before we move on. Any updates on the pediatric trials for solriamfetol for ADHD?
Yeah, what's the latest on that?
They've confirmed that they're planning to start the trials, which is great news.
But they haven't announced the exact timing yet?
Right. They're still being a bit tight-lipped about that, but the fact that they're moving forward is definitely a positive sign.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Impressive financials, a packed pipeline, and even some potential challenges on the horizon. What's the overall takeaway for investors? Should they be excited about Axsome?
I think excited is a pretty fair assessment. This is clearly a company on the move. They've got strong products, a pipeline overflowing with potential, and a solid financial foundation.
Sounds like a recipe for success. But as always, there are risks involved.
Of course, it's important to weigh the potential rewards against those risks. But I'd say Axsome is definitely a company worth keeping a close eye on.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we'll really unpack Axsome's financials and see what those numbers can tell us about their future prospects.
All right, so welcome back to Talk Tickers. We've talked about how amazing Axsome's performance this quarter is, but now it's time to get into the nitty-gritty and really dissect their financials.
Yeah, because amazing products and a killer pipeline don't mean a whole lot if the company is not financially sound.
Exactly. The good news is Axsome is in a ridiculously strong position financially.
Okay, lay it on us.
Well, first off, remember that impressive $104.8 million revenue figure we were drooling over earlier?
Yeah, still can't get over that.
That's an 81% jump compared to the same period last year.
Wow. That's incredible. Really shows how much demand there is for what they're selling.
Absolutely. And a huge chunk of that is thanks to Avality, which brought in $80.4 million in this quarter alone.
Avality is becoming a household name, I swear.
It is. Shows how much it's helping people struggling with major depressive disorder.
It's inspiring to see them making such a difference in people's lives. But let's get back to those numbers. What about their gross to net?
Oh, good question. Gross to net is basically the percentage of revenue a company actually gets to keep after all the rebates and discounts they give to insurance companies and things like that.
Ah, got it. So it's like the real revenue.
Exactly. For Avality, their gross to net was about 50% this quarter.
Okay. So is that good or bad?
That's actually a little better than previous quarters, so it's trending in the right direction.
So that's a good sign then, right? I think it will keep going up.
Well, they think it'll stay around that range, maybe dip a little bit in the fourth quarter, typical year-end adjustments and all that.
Okay, makes sense.
But the good news is they expect it to keep improving in 2025.
All right, so their revenue is rock solid. Gross to net looks good. But what about expenses? All those clinical trials, sales team expansions, got to be pricey, right?
You're telling me. Running a company in this industry is not for the faint of heart. So R&D, research and development, that's always a biggie.
Yeah, got to spend money to make money, especially when you're talking about groundbreaking treatments.
For sure, Axsome's not skimping on R&D. This quarter, their R&D expenses came out to $45.4 million.
Okay, that's a chunk of change. What are they spending it on?
Well, a lot of it is for their clinical trials, especially for AXS-05 for Alzheimer's agitation and solriamfetol, which, remember, they're testing for like 1 million different things.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And then there's manufacturing costs and all that jazz.
So they're putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to that pipeline.
100%. Oh, and we can't forget about sales and marketing. That cost them $95.6 million this quarter.
Whoa, even more than R&D. Are they going a little overboard with the marketing?
Not at all. Remember, they have 2 drugs on the market already, Avality and Sunosi, and then they have to get ready for all those potential new drug launches.
True. It all adds up.
Exactly. It's a balancing act, but they seem to be doing a good job so far.
So revenue's up, expenses are up. What about their bottom line? That's what investors really want to know, right?
Absolutely. So in Q3, they reported a net loss of $64.6 million.
Oof, that's not great, is it?
Hold on. Before you panic, we need to understand where that loss is coming from.
Okay, so break it down for me.
A lot of that loss is due to things called non-cash charges, stuff like adjustments for future payments related to acquisitions and partnerships, basically accounting stuff.
Oh, so not really money they're losing.
Exactly. They're actually in a really strong position cash-wise. They finished the quarter with $327.3 million in cash.
Oh, okay. That's a nice little cushion.
It is. And they think this is enough to get them to that magical land of cash flow positivity.
All right, so not in the black just yet, but they're on the right path.
They are.
Now, what about stock performance? Are investors excited about all this?
They are. After they released their Q3 numbers, their stock shot up over 9%.
Wow. Investors are definitely paying attention.
It's not just about the price, though. It shows confidence in Axsome's ability to execute their plan and bring value to shareholders in the long run.
I like the sound of that. But wait, before we move on, there's a ton of other financial stuff, right?
Oh, yeah. There are a bunch of other indicators that can give us an even clearer picture of how they're doing, like their gross profit margin, for example.
Gross profit margin. Remind me what that is again?
It's basically a measure of how much profit they make on each dollar of sales after subtracting the costs of making and selling their stuff.
Got it. So higher is it better, right?
You got it. A high gross profit margin means they're controlling their costs well. In Q3, theirs was a little over 48%.
So they're pocketing almost half of every dollar they bring in. Not bad.
Nope. And as their sales keep growing, that number could go even higher.
Now, what about their operating margin? That's a big one, right?
It is. It gives you a broader view of profitability because it takes into account all their operating expenses, not just the cost of goods sold.
R&D, marketing, the whole shebang.
The whole shebang. Now, theirs is negative right now, which is not really surprising given they're spending so much on R&D and expanding their business.
So nothing to worry about at this point.
Nope. What we want to see is that margin moving towards zero and then eventually into positive territory. That's the sign of a truly sustainable business.
Makes sense. So they're not profitable yet, but they're on their way.
Exactly. Another important metric is their return on equity, or ROE.
Ah, yeah. Investors love talking about ROE.
It's basically a measure of how effectively they're using shareholder money to make a profit. It tells investors what kind of bang they're getting for their buck.
So how is Axsome doing on that front?
Well, since they're still running at a loss, their ROE is negative. But as they get closer to profitability, that number should turn positive and hopefully keep growing.
Okay, fingers crossed. Now, what about debt? That can be a scary thing for companies, especially ones growing this fast.
That's a really good point. But Axsome's in great shape when it comes to debt. Their debt load is pretty manageable.
So they're not drowning in loans.
Nope. They're mainly using equity financing to keep things running.
So issuing stock instead of borrowing money. Smart move.
Very smart, especially for a company at their stage of growth. It keeps their risk down and gives them more flexibility.
All right, so looking at all of this, is Axsome financially sound? Give it to me straight.
Absolutely. They're killing it revenue-wise. They've got tons of cash on hand. Their debt is manageable, and they're making strategic investments in R&D and expanding their business.
They're not profitable yet, but they're heading in the right direction, and they seem to be very financially responsible.
Exactly. They're definitely a company worth watching.
All right, so before we jump into the specifics of their pipeline, which I am very excited to do,
Oh, me too.
I think it would be helpful to zoom out for a sec and look at the bigger picture. Like, what are some of the market trends impacting companies like Axsome?
Ooh, good point.
Yeah, so what's going on out there in the market?
Well, one of the biggest trends is the growing demand for CNS treatments. We're learning more and more about how the brain works, and that's leading to a boom in new drugs for conditions like depression, anxiety, sleep disorders, Alzheimer's, you name it.
Makes sense. As we become more aware of mental health issues, more people are seeking treatment, and companies like Axsome are stepping up to meet those needs.
Exactly. And people are realizing that these conditions have a huge economic impact too.
What do you mean?
Well, when people aren't getting treatment for mental health or neurological conditions, it costs billions of dollars, lost productivity, healthcare expenses, all that.
Wow, I never really thought about it that way.
It's a big deal. So there's a lot of incentive for companies to develop effective treatments, both from a humanitarian perspective and a financial one.
So Axsome's is in the right place at the right time.
They are. The market is ripe for innovation in this space, and they're leading the charge.
Okay, so now that we've got a good grasp on their finances and the overall market landscape, I'm itching to hear more about this pipeline of theirs.
Me too. It's like a treasure chest of potential.
Well, let's open it up and see what's inside. All right, welcome back to Talk Tickers. We've been talking all about Axsome Therapeutics, their financials, the market, and now it's time to dig into that juicy pipeline of theirs.
Yeah. This is the fun part. A company's pipeline is like a window into the future, and Axsome's future is looking bright.
Okay, so let's jump in. What are some of the highlights? What are investors most excited about?
Well, the drug that's got everyone buzzing right now is AXS-07 for migraine.
AXS-07, that's the one they just resubmitted to the FDA, right?
That's the one. The decision date is January 31st, 2025.
So just a few months ago. But the migraine market is pretty crowded, isn't it? What makes AXS-07 different?
It's a really unique drug. It's multi-mechanistic, meaning it targets multiple pathways involved in migraine headaches.
Ah, okay. So instead of just masking the pain, it's actually trying to stop those headaches from happening in the first place.
That's the idea. And they're running this trial called Emerge that's looking at patients who haven't responded well to other migraine drugs, specifically the oral CGRP antagonists.
So those are like the current gold standard treatments.
Yeah, pretty much.
If AXS-07 can help those patients, that would be a huge win. When are we expecting those Emerge results?
Sometime this quarter, so keep your eyes peeled.
Will do. Okay, so AXS-07 has the potential to be a game changer in the migraine world.
Absolutely. And then there's AXS-14 for fibromyalgia, another really tough condition to treat.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We talked about that earlier. There's a lot of unmet need in the fibromyalgia space.
A lot. And the great thing is Axsome is planning to file their NDA for AXS-14 this month.
This month. Wow, that's big news. What makes AXS-14 so special? Why are people so excited about it?
Well, one of the most promising things about AXS-14 is that it seems to have a really significant impact on fatigue, which is a huge issue for a lot of fibromyalgia patients.
Fatigue is no joke. It can be incredibly debilitating.
Exactly. And current treatments don't always address that effectively.
So if AXS-14 can really help with fatigue, that would be a game changer.
Absolutely. And it's not just patients who are excited. Payers, like the insurance companies, are also paying close attention to this one.
Why is that? Why do they care?
Well, they realize that a good treatment for fibromyalgia could really improve people's lives and actually end up lowering healthcare costs in the long run.
Ah, because people wouldn't need as many doctor visits, less medication?
Exactly. So it's a win-win.
Okay, so AXS-14 is another potential blockbuster in the making.
Big time. Then we have AXS-05 for Alzheimer's disease agitation, which is a really tough aspect of the disease to manage.
Yeah, Alzheimer's is such a heartbreaking disease, and the agitation can be really challenging for both the patients and their families.
It's a major issue. Axsome has already got some promising results from 2 phase 3 trials, Advance 1 and Accord 1, but the really exciting ones are Advance 2 and Accord 2.
Those are the ones that are wrapping up now, right?
Yep, we should have those results this quarter.
So if those trials are successful, they could be submitting an NDA for AXS-05 pretty soon.
Exactly. And they're already thinking ahead about how to make sure patients can actually afford the treatment, which is a huge hurdle in the Alzheimer's world.
The cost of Alzheimer's medications is crazy.
I know, it's a big problem. So Axsome's working closely with payers to hopefully make AXS-05 accessible if it gets approved.
That's good to hear. They're not just thinking about profits, they're actually thinking about patients.
That's what we like to see. Okay, then there's AXS-12, also called reboxetine, for narcolepsy.
Narcolepsy, that's the sleep disorder, right?
Right. They're currently running a phase 3 trial called Encore to gather more long-term data.
So they already have some positive data from previous trials, but they want to make sure it's safe and effective over the long haul.
Exactly. They're expecting those results this quarter, too. Axsome's got a lot on their plate.
Busy times. Okay, so let's see. We've got AXS-07 for migraine, AXS-14 for fibromyalgia, AXS-05 for Alzheimer's agitation, and AXS-12 for narcolepsy.
Phew. That's a lot of potential blockbusters. Is that it? Is that everything in the pipeline?
Oh, it's not. Don't forget about solriamfetol, the multitasker.
Oh, yeah. The one they're looking at for ADHD, depression, binge eating, and shift work disorder.
That's the one.
It's like they're trying to corner the market on being tired and wired. They might be. But seriously, these are all conditions where there's a real need for new and better treatments, and solriamfetol seems to have a lot of potential in all of these areas.
Okay, so Axsome's pipeline is incredibly diverse. They're targeting some really important unmet needs, and they're firing on all cylinders. I'm impressed.
Me too. They've come a long way in a short amount of time. Who knows what they'll achieve in the next few years.
All right, so before we wrap things up, it's time for our favorite segment. This is not financial advice. You ready to cook up some crazy but plausible trade ideas based on what we've learned about Axsome?
Always. Hit me.
Okay, so picture this. 2025 is a huge year for Axsome. AXS-07 gets approved, launches like a rocket, blockbuster sales all over the place.
Love it. Keep going.
Then boom, the ADVANCE-2 and ACCORD-2 trials for their Alzheimer's drug come back positive. They file for FDA approval.
The stock is going to be skyrocketing.
Exactly. And then the rumors start. Big pharma companies are sniffing around thinking about acquiring Axsome.
Ooh, who do you think would go for it?
Maybe someone like Eli Lilly. They're already a big player in the Alzheimer's market, and Axsome's pipeline would be a huge asset for them.
I could totally see that happening.
So here's our this is not financial advice trade.
Right.
We're buying call options on Axsome with a strike price way above the current price, betting that those acquisition rumors are going to send the stock through the roof.
Risky, but potentially very rewarding. Classic, this is not financial advice material.
Exactly. Just to be clear, folks, this is all hypothetical. Don't go making any investment decisions based on our wild speculation.
Seriously, do your own research, talk to a financial advisor, and all that good stuff.
All right, so that wraps up our deep dive into Axsome Therapeutics. They've got impressive financials, a pipeline full of potential, and they're operating in a really exciting market.
It's been a blast talking about them. They're definitely a company to watch.
Thanks for listening to Talk Tickers. Be sure to subscribe for more earnings calls, deep dives, and all the latest news in the biopharma world.
And remember, do your own research.
Always. See you next time.